General of the ANC. We are zeroing in now into the vote for seats and the contestation in the Eastern Cape. The ANC as a party is leading the race since we last checked to capture most of the municipalities in the Eastern Cape. The battle for the control of Nelson Mandela Bay Metro, of course, is still on. That's what a lot of eyes are on. The DA was leading when we looked at the results the last time. The two parties have been fighting for the Metro over the last 5 years after the ANC lost it to a DA coalition in 2016. So we're going to chat to my colleague Bulelani Philip now, who is at the Eastern Cape's Results Centre. And of course, we'll also be speaking to Vanessa Puna, who is in Cape Town in just a moment. But let's start with you, Bulelani. So just in terms of Nelson Mandela Bay, the DA, as I mentioned, have been leading. What are the results now as we speak, and who appear to be the kingmakers that the ANC could be taking up those coalition talks with?
Well, good evening to you. Tsepiso, and to the viewers. It's been a long day. We've been standing on the floor and trying to work this story out. And as the results are coming and trickling in, we've been trying to keep a close eye in terms of how things are going at the Nelson Mandela metropolitan municipalities. According to the numbers that we have from the IEC website, we know that at the moment, the number of captured votes in the Nelson Mandela Bay municipality, it's about 22%. We just checked them a short while ago, and of course the ANC now is sitting at about 45.2%. The DA is at 39.9%, and the EFF at 6.85%, and the African Integrity Movement, which is a new organization, is sitting at 1.59%. Of course, that tells you that both the ANC and the DA are neck and neck, and of course, given the number of votes that have been captured already, the race is still very long, and it's still early days to decide or to determine who is going to win this race. But according to the figures that we have at the moment, the ANC is just edging ahead of the DA. And of course, even if these numbers stay this way, both these parties would need to have a working partner or a couple of working partners in order to be above that 50% threshold in order to form a government. But of course, what we do know from history is that the ANC, when it put together its coalition partners, some of them actually went away and actually decided to actually work with the DA, which is why currently the DA-led coalition was the last administration in Gqeberha. But of course, now what we need to know is that given that the numbers that we have, that there is, at least at the moment, there is no outright majority winner, who will the ANC work with if it needs to work with other political parties to form a government? And we spoke to the ANC's provincial chairperson, Oscar Mabuyane, earlier this afternoon, and he says that they are open to have discussions with any political party if they need to have a government. But on the other hand, the DA seems to be having mixed reactions, because on one end the provincial spokesperson says that they have been instructed by the national leader to actually speak to the ANC, but the provincial deputy chairperson says that from the onset they have never wanted to work with the EFF or the ANC. Now it leaves the EFF as the kingmaker in this particular municipality, but the history says that that party has actually stood back and never wanted to be part of any coalition agreement. So now, what's going to happen is that the ANC and the DA will have to look into all the other smaller political parties, probably about 7 of them, in order to just try and conjure up that percentage that needs to push both sides respectively above the 50% threshold.
All right, Bulelani, so let's talk about the provincial picture now as you talk about those coalition talks and arrangements. It really comes down to a quid pro quo. So I want to look at what the Eastern Cape support is like. According to the IEC's leaderboard, ANC seems to have 46.66%. So who are their best bets in terms of who they're likely to get into bed with, so to speak? Just give us a provincial picture at the moment in terms of the vote.
So firstly, let me maybe put the picture that we're seeing now on the board in terms of the percentages according to the political parties. At the moment, 68% of the votes have been captured. So we're somewhat a little bit away from the 100% mark. So what it leaves us is that the ANC at the moment has got about 66.5% of the votes. The DA has got 12.65% of the votes. And the EFF is at third place with 7.72%. The UDM is at fourth place with 2.86%. And the African Transformation Movement is sitting at 2.19%. But some of the results that have already been fully captured, what we are seeing is that the ANC has actually won several municipalities quite outright, and those include Walter Sisulu and Ndlambe, Blue Crane Route, Inxuba Yethemba, Sundays River Valley. Those are some of the municipalities that the ANC has won outright. But on the other hand, the DA has also been able to win the Koga municipality. So as things stand now, the ANC is quite in the hot and driving seat in terms of the power that it has in these municipalities. Tsepiso?
All right, thank you so much for that, Bulelani Philip, who is at the Results Operations Centre at International Centre in East London. Let's find out now from my colleague Vanessa Puna, who is in the Western Cape, what that picture looks like. We see the DA holding on to much of its support, but we have been told, especially in the important metros, that the newcomers have really caused quite a stir. We've seen a lot from the independents. Give us a fuller picture of the Western Cape in general, and then we'll drill down to the most important of the wards and metros.
Yes, a very warm good evening to you here from the Provincial Results Operations Centre in the Western Cape. And of course, let me just reiterate what the leaderboard said just a short while ago. In terms of the province, the DA at something like 53.3%, the ANC at 19.25%, the Good Party, the newcomer on the block, garnering 4.81%. Now, I can tell you that in the Western Cape at the moment, 23 of the 25 municipalities have verified results at this stage, with two outstanding, and of course that would be George and the city of Cape Town. And I understand at this stage that the results verification for the city of Cape Town is standing at around 20% at the moment, and that will certainly be one to watch, because we do know that the city of Cape Town had been a DA stronghold for the past decade or so. At the moment, I can tell you that of the 23 municipalities that had been verified, based on that information that is coming out, we can estimate at this point that the voter turnout in the province is estimated to be at something like 50%. Of course, that happening as people, about 1.5 million of the 3.1 million registered voters then would have made their mark here in the Western Cape. Very interesting, I can tell you, when we were briefed a short while ago by the IEC here in the province, is that at that stage, 6 councils in the Western Cape will have one majority party which will govern outright. And let me just give you some of those names at this point in time. Some of those councils would be Berg River, Swartland, Mossel Bay, Hessequa, Swellendam and Overstrand. But I think what is important to note at this stage is that currently there are 14 hung councils in the Western Cape. And if I can just refer back to 2016, in that local government poll, there were 4 hung councils. They, of course, were Hessequa, Beaufort West, Langsburg and Beto. And, of course, the interesting issue around this time round would be, of course, what happens with those 14 hung councils. And, of course, the next few hours and the next few days will be taking up the issues around coalition, exactly who will be going into coalitions, who will be forming those coalitions. The point really from many of the smaller parties over the course of this election period in the Western Cape and in many municipalities here in the Western Cape was a matter of bringing down that DA majority. We do know that in 2016. That party, of course, having garnered, 67% of the vote. I think it was the highest it had ever managed to accomplish. Let me just take a look then at what we call a sort of gains and losses of some of those bigger parties. In the city of Cape Town, for example, in 2016, yes, the DA, 67% of the vote. Currently, when we look at the figures at the moment, it appears as though they will end up somewhere at around 61%. And of course, that would denote a 6% decrease in terms of that comparison. The ANC, on the other hand, in 2016 had something like 25% of the vote here in the city of Cape Town. Currently, it's looking at around 14%. So that then denotes something like a 10% decrease. And of course, as the results for the city of Cape Town come in and are verified throughout the course of this evening, we'll have a better understanding of exactly who the biggest winners and losers would have been in this metro, the only metro in the Western Cape. I can tell you that, of course, the award winners are trickling in at the moment. Not much to say about that as yet. And, of course, those figures will be coming through overnight. According to the ICA in the Western Cape, we can expect final figures for all the municipalities to be verified by tomorrow morning. And I suppose then a much clearer picture will then emerge in terms of how the next 5 years will pan out for the people of the Western Cape.
So just very briefly, Vanessa, I mean, I'm just looking at some of these, the party, the DA doing very well in places like Burgerfield, Overstand, etc. But just from what you're seeing with your analysts, is the DA doing better in the suburban areas? What about the township? Because we know some of the politics of the Western Cape.
Indeed, and I think when we spoke to our analyst, Sanda Ngwasheng, over the past couple of weeks, and of course even over the past 2 days, today she was just on air a short while ago, she always said that the DA would still garner the majority of the vote in the Western Cape, however with a reduced margin. And when we look at the figures coming through at the moment, that indeed seems to be true. I mean, for example, some of the smaller parties that were said to make some sort of inroads into that majority of the DA were, for example, the Freedom Front Plus, and they've shown some growth at the moment. And then also the newcomer on the block, the Good Party, Patricia de Lille's Good Party at the moment, as I said, looking at about 4.1%. When you talk about the DA's track record, really, if you will, in the townships and informal settlements, the sense that we have gotten from people on the ground, and of course that we can unpack later when we look at the individual awards coming in, the individual results coming in, but just the sense of speaking to people over the past couple of months, what they have been saying is that the DA touts the party or the Western Cape as being the best run, but in township areas, in informal settlement areas, there are massive challenges. Those, of course, including issues around water, issues around sewage. Crime is a huge problem in those communities, and if indeed the DA does manage to clinch the majority of the municipalities in the Western Cape, I would think that over the next 5 years, much work needs to be put in to those areas where the feeling is that people are neglected because, for example, a DA party cannot be satisfied with having seen their majority drop from something like 67% a mere 5 years ago to just over 53% at the moment. And of course, we know that this is still subject to change with two of those municipalities still due to come in, but a significant drop. And I would think that the party would go back to the drawing board if they are looking to make some serious inroads into those traditional non-DA strongholds, but also communities that had put their trust in the Democratic Alliance, who have still been complaining about those issues around service delivery.
All right, Vanessa, thank you very much. Vanessa Puna, my colleague there at the Western Cape Results Operations Centre in Cape Town, a breakdown of how the official opposition is performing there. Let's take you back now to